Washington is once again a city consumed by political warfare. The city's iconic monuments and marble halls are shrouded in tension as the nation's leaders brace for another round of high-stakes conflict. The stakes have rarely felt higher, and the mood in the capital is one of deep uncertainty. The winter chill outside is nothing compared to the heat inside Congress, where lawmakers are demanding the arrest of key Trump administration officials. The air is thick with urgency as both sides dig in, unwilling to back down. The corridors of power echo with heated arguments and whispered strategy sessions as the nation watches anxiously. This isn't routine partisanship. Democrats, joined by a few Republicans, argue the administration's recent deployment of federal forces to cities like Chicago and Portland is a dangerous overreach. They warn that such actions threaten the very fabric of American democracy, setting a precedent that could haunt the nation for years to come. Protesters outside federal buildings amplify these concerns, their voices growing louder with each passing day. President Trump's aggressive domestic agenda, especially the use of National Guard troops against the wishes of local leaders, has pushed tensions to a breaking point. The sight of military vehicles rolling through American streets has shocked many, fueling fears of a government willing to override local authority in pursuit of its own goals. The administration insists it's restoring order, but critics see a dangerous power grab. Lawmakers claim senior officials are not just following orders, but masterminding a strategy to suppress dissent and undermine state sovereignty. Behind closed doors, accusations fly and tempers flare as both parties struggle to define the limits of executive power. The question of accountability looms large, with many demanding answers and consequences. The calls for arrests are about more than accountability. They're an attempt to halt what many see as a threat to American democracy. For protesters and lawmakers alike, this is a battle for the soul of the nation, a fight to preserve the principles that have long defined the United States. The pressure on Congress to act decisively has never been greater. Congress now faces a defining moment: act decisively, or risk permanent damage to the nation's checks and balances. The decisions made in these chambers will echo for generations, shaping the future of American governance and the balance of power between branches. The stage is set for a confrontation that will test the resilience of the country's institutions. As dawn breaks over the Capitol, the nation waits to see whether its leaders will rise to the challenge, or whether the escalating demands will push American democracy to its limits. At the center of this crisis are Trump's top advisors, Stephen Miller, Attorney General Pam Bondi, and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. Miller, the architect of the administration's hardline policies, is accused of masterminding the use of National Guard troops in Democratic cities. Bondi is under fire for providing legal cover and withholding key documents, while Hegseth authorized controversial troop deployments. On the other side, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker and Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson have become leading voices in the legal and political resistance. Congressional Democrats, joined by a handful of uneasy Republicans, are building a public case for criminal investigations. Even within the GOP, libertarian-leaning members, like Thomas Massie, warn that federal force against states sets a dangerous precedent. The battle lines are drawn, but the conflict is far from a simple partisan fight. The administration's strategy, using federal law enforcement and National Guard troops to enforce policy in uncooperative cities, has been years in the making. Stephen Miller outlined this approach in 2023, and by 2025, it was reality. National Guard units from red states deployed to blue cities, bypassing local authorities. President Trump cites crime and unrest as justification, but critics see a direct assault on state authority. Legal battles erupted immediately, with cities like Chicago suing to block deployments and arguing the president's actions are unlawful. On the ground, incidents like the shooting of a Chicago resident by federal agents have fueled outrage and claims of federal overreach. The administration's use of force is now seen by many as a quasi-military occupation, deepening the national divide. Federal deployments have turned cities like Chicago and Portland into battlegrounds of protest and litigation. Civil rights groups and local leaders have organized mass demonstrations and filed lawsuits, alleging excessive force and violations of civil liberties. In Chicago, the ACLU documented federal agents using tear gas and pepper balls on peaceful protesters, escalating tensions. Portland saw similar scenes, with federal agents clashing with demonstrators and city leaders decrying the militarized response. Legal challenges argue the president lacks authority to deploy the National Guard without state consent, citing the Posse Comitatus Act. Meanwhile, some Republican governors welcome federal intervention, creating a patchwork of support and opposition across the country. The debate over public safety has become another front in America's deepening culture war. With political solutions stalled and legislative gridlock deepening, the courts have emerged as the primary battleground for this high-stakes constitutional conflict. As elected officials struggle to find common ground, it's the judiciary that now holds the power to shape the nation's response. State and local governments, alarmed by federal intervention, are filing lawsuits to block deployments, thrusting fundamental questions about federalism, states' rights, and executive authority into the spotlight. These legal battles are not just about immediate actions, they're about the very structure of American democracy. In a landmark ruling that sent shockwaves through legal and political circles, Trump-appointed Judge Karen Immergut issued a restraining order blocking National Guard deployments to Portland, citing a lack of clear justification and raising concerns about federal overreach. The administration's attempts to circumvent the order were swiftly rejected by the courts, setting a powerful legal precedent that other states are now watching closely. This decision has emboldened challengers and complicated the federal government's strategy. Yet, the legal landscape remains unsettled and fragmented. While Oregon succeeded in blocking deployments, California's courts have allowed them to proceed, at least for now, pending further appeals. This patchwork of rulings has created uncertainty for officials and citizens alike. These mixed outcomes highlight the judiciary's pivotal role in interpreting the Constitution, but also underscore the unpredictability of the road ahead. Each new ruling adds another layer of complexity to an already volatile situation. Ultimately, the final word may come from the Supreme Court, whose decision could fundamentally redefine the balance of power between Washington and the states, setting a precedent that will echo for generations. For now, the courts stand as the last line of defense for those challenging the administration's authority, offering a forum where constitutional principles are tested and the rule of law is upheld. The stakes could not be higher, as the outcome will shape the future of American governance and the limits of federal power. The crisis has exposed deep divisions within the Republican Party, as lawmakers struggle between loyalty to President Trump and core conservative principles. Trump's demand to release the Epstein files split the GOP, with public clashes and accusations of betrayal among party leaders. This internal turmoil weakens the party's ability to present a united front on federal deployments. Some Republicans, wary of federal overreach, are quietly questioning the administration's strategy. In contrast, Democrats are unified. Governors, mayors, and members of Congress have rallied around legal challenges and public opposition. Figures like Pritzker and Johnson have become symbols of resistance, energizing the party's base. The conflict has given Democrats a clear message, defending democracy and the rule of law against executive overreach. At the heart of the conflict is a fundamental debate over federalism and the limits of presidential power. The Trump administration claims broad authority to enforce federal law, even over state objections, citing the Insurrection Act. Opponents argue the 10th Amendment and the Posse Comitatus Act protect state sovereignty and restrict the use of federal troops for domestic law enforcement. Critics say the administration is misusing the law to justify a power grab, while supporters insist it's necessary to restore order. The lawsuits now before the courts will determine whether the president can act unilaterally or must respect state autonomy. The outcome will shape the future of American governance and the balance between Washington and the states. The nation awaits a definitive answer from the judiciary. The standoff between the Trump administration and its opponents has left the nation deeply divided and on edge. Across the country, Americans are grappling with a sense of uncertainty and anxiety as the political climate grows more volatile by the day. Families, friends, and entire communities find themselves at odds, struggling to make sense of rapidly changing events and the deepening rift in the national fabric. In cities under federal intervention, fear and mistrust are rampant, with many viewing federal agents as occupiers rather than protectors. The presence of armed personnel on city streets has heightened tensions, leading to nightly confrontations and a growing sense of alienation between citizens and those meant to serve them. For many, the line between safety and oppression has never felt so blurred. The administration shows no sign of retreat, betting that its law and order message will energize its base. Rallies grow louder, and political rhetoric intensifies as leaders double down on their positions. Supporters see strength and resolve, while critics warn of escalating authoritarianism and the erosion of civil liberties. Legal battles are moving toward the Supreme Court, where the fate of executive power hangs in the balance. Lawyers on both sides prepare for historic arguments, knowing that the decisions made here could set precedents for generations to come. The nation watches, aware that the stakes could not be higher. The outcome could either cement a dramatic expansion of presidential authority or trigger a constitutional crisis if the president defies the courts. The very foundations of American governance are being tested as questions of accountability and the rule of law come to the forefront. For Americans, the uncertainty is palpable. Political norms are breaking down, and the stakes for democracy have never been higher. Conversations at dinner tables and in public spaces are filled with worry, as people wonder what the future holds and whether the country can find a path back to unity and stability. The coming months will test the strength of the nation's institutions and its ability to resolve conflict through law, not force. The resilience of democracy will depend on whether leaders and citizens alike can uphold the principles of justice, fairness, and respect for the Constitution. The future of American democracy is on the line, and the choices made now will echo for generations. As the nation stands at this crossroads, the world watches to see which path it will choose.